You're watching BBC Newsroom Live. It's 11 a.m. and these are the main stories this morning. Police in Melbourne are treating a knife attack in the city centre as a terrorist incident after one person was killed and two others injured. The attacker was shot at the scene and later died in hospital.
A short time, probably about half an hour after this alleged offender arrived at the hospital, he succumbed to his injuries and died at hospital from that gunshot wound.
The DUP accused the Prime Minister of breaking her promise over plans to avoid a hard Irish border after Brexit. The Prime Minister has laid wreaths at the graves of the first and last British soldiers killed in the First World War to mark the armistice centenary. This summer's heatwave helped the economy to grow, but cracks are beginning to show as consumers cut back on spending. Also, coming up before midday, we speak to the 27-year-old world chess champion facing his latest world title contest. Hello, good morning to you and welcome to BBC Newsroom Live. I'm Anita McVeigh. Police in the Australian city of Melbourne say they're treating as a terror incident a stabbing attack in the city centre. One person was stabbed to death and two others injured in the rush hour. Police opened fire on one man who was armed with a knife. It's believed he'd set a car on fire before attacking passers-by. With the story, which contains some disturbing images from the start, here's our Australia correspondent Howell Griffith.
Face to face with an armed attacker, officers confront a man brandishing a knife. He continued to swing at them until, moments later, they shot him in the chest. The police were called after reports of a vehicle on fire. It had been driven into the heart of the city's busy shopping district before bursting into flames. Gas canisters were later found at the scene. When the police arrived, they found members of the public had been attacked with a knife, one of them fatally.
3 people have been stabbed. Unfortunately, one is deceased at the scene. 2 other victims are currently at hospital. The bomb response unit have cordoned off the area. The MFB have extinguished a vehicle fire. The bomb response unit is now making the scene safe.
The city centre was cordoned off. People were warned by a new siren alert system to keep clear. Many were left in disbelief by what they'd witnessed.
There's been a lot of police officers that have looked a bit concerned. You know, I've run into some friends here as well who are also concerned. Videos have emerged of the shooting, attempted stabbings and all that sort of stuff. So it's quite graphic, quite violent. And at the moment, I guess the best way to describe it is just shock.
Counter-terrorism officers are now investigating. They say the man was known to them, but was not on a terror watch list. Detectives say there's no ongoing threat. But Melbourne has become the latest city to face the question of whether more can be done to protect the public from sudden, chaotic acts of terror. Howell Griffith, BBC News.
Well, police have given a further update on the alleged attacker. Here's what they had to say.
What we know so far about the individual who police shot and has died at hospital, from what we know of that individual, we are treating this as a terrorism incident. We now know a bit more about the identity of that person. Initially that person didn't have any identification on them, but we believe we now have a confirmation on the identity of that person. For operational reasons, we now have the Counter-Terrorism Command and the Homicide Squad dealing with this matter. And there are ongoing investigations being conducted by the Counter-Terrorism Command, and accordingly I'm not at liberty at this point to disclose the identity of that person. But we are, as I say, we do have counter-terrorism investigations currently underway. In relation to that person, he is known to police. He's known to police mainly in respect to relatives that he has that are certainly persons of interest to us. And he's someone that accordingly is known to both Victoria Police and the Federal Intelligence Authorities.
The latest from police in Melbourne. And we can talk now to Gloria Kalesh, who's a reporter with the Australian broadcaster SBS. She's been at the scene in Melbourne. Gloria, hello to you. We've seen some pretty graphic images of this man lashing out at bystanders and police officers with a knife. What more is known about him?
So as we just heard there with that grab from police, they did say that he is known to them. He's described as being 31 years of age. He's someone that they have had dealings with in the past. And also, as you mentioned there, some of the scenes which people captured on their cameras, on their phones, shows quite graphically what unfolded in Bourke Street. And Bourke Street is the heart of Melbourne. It's the heart of Melbourne's CBD, and it's Friday evening here. It would normally be filled with people, but it was basically dead in that area. There was nothing going on. It's cordoned off. It's expected to be cordoned off until at least tomorrow morning as police continue their investigation.
Such a violent attack in front of so many people, Gloria. Are any more details emerging about the victims of this?
We don't know too much about the victims at this stage. We know that they were three men. One of them is a 59-year-old and another is a 26-year-old man. They're all in hospital recovering from their injuries, and that's as much as we know about them at this stage.
And what reaction, obviously so much of it coming in, what reaction is there to this incident? Very difficult for the security forces there to actually anticipate something like this happening.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, this is the second sort of major attack that Melbourne's had to deal with, particularly in this area in Bourke Street. Back in January of last year, there was 6 people which were killed and about 30 people were injured. A man deliberately drove his car into pedestrians in that area. And following that attack, authorities here in Victoria took a number of steps to try and ensure that something like that didn't happen again. There was a number of concrete boulders which were placed at one end of the mall and the other end of the mall. But unfortunately, in this section where this man has driven in, this is a section where you can still actually drive to the top of the mall where those other boulders actually are. So from that perspective, there wasn't much that could have been done, but certainly that attack in January of last year heightened security in that entire area. And the other thing as well that we heard for the first time too was the warning sirens which came up, and we heard the announcements while we were standing there at the scene, just informing people that there'd been an incident. The incident was now over, but advising people that they should still stay clear of the CBD.
OK, Gloria, thank you very much for that update. Gloria Kalesh, reporter with the Australian broadcaster SBS, who's been at the scene of that attack in Melbourne.
Holly, thank you. Australian police are treating as terrorism an attack on a busy shopping street in central Melbourne. A Somali man stabbed 3 people after driving a car into the city centre that was laden with gas cylinders, which then caught fire. The attacker was shot by police and later died in hospital. Howell Griffith has sent this report from Sydney, and a warning it does include some disturbing images.
Face to face with an armed attacker, officers confront a man brandishing a knife. He continued to swing at them until, moments later, they shot him in the chest. The police were called after reports of a vehicle on fire. It had been driven into the heart of the city's busy shopping district before bursting into flames. Gas canisters were later found at the scene. When the police arrived, they found members of the public had been attacked with a knife, one of them fatally. The attacker also later died in hospital. Officers say he wasn't on a terror watch list, but he and his family, originally from Somalia, were so-called persons of interest.
In relation to that person, he is known to police. He's known to police mainly in respect to relatives that he has that are certainly persons of interest to us. and he's someone that accordingly is known to both Victoria Police and the Federal Intelligence Authorities.
The police say the threat is over, but many here have been left shaken and anxious by what they witnessed.
There's been a lot of police officers that have looked a bit concerned. I've run into some friends here as well who are also concerned. Videos have emerged of the shooting, attempted stabbings and all that sort of stuff, so it's quite graphic, quite violent, and at the moment I guess the best way to describe it is just shock.
Counter-terrorism officers will need to establish whether the man was working alone or taking instructions from elsewhere. Melbourne's people face the question of whether more can be done to protect the public from such sudden, chaotic acts of terror. Hywel Griffith, BBC News.